The grand ballroom was a swirl of glittering gowns and polished laughter, but Ellie found herself fixated not on the sparkling chandeliers or the clinking glasses, but on the man who seemed to command the entire scene with nothing more than a smile. Maximilian Crane, tall and impeccably dressed, moved through the crowd like a shark among minnows, his charm a dazzling weapon, his eyes sharp and calculating beneath the surface. Ellie had spent the better part of the evening dodging suspicion, tripping over her own feet, and trying desperately to maintain the illusion of belonging. Yet now, as she leaned against the cool marble column in a shadowed recess, a different kind of attention held her captive. She watched Maximilian with a mixture of fascination and wariness. His smile was flawless, his gestures practiced and smooth, but every so often, a flicker crossed his eyes, a momentary crack in the mask he wore so well. The cacophony of the gala faded into the background as she noticed the subtle signs, the brief tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible glance to the side when he thought no one was watching, the way his laughter never quite reached his eyes. Ellie's artist's eye caught what others missed, the vulnerability hidden beneath the veneer of wealth and power. Gathering courage, Ellie edged closer as Maximilian slipped away from the crowd, retreating to a quieter corner near the library. There she overheard a fragment of conversation that surprised her. It was hushed and hurried, spoken to one of his less competent accomplices, a man who seemed more anxious than devious. "If this empire cracks, it's all over," Maximilian muttered, voice low but tense. "No one believes in me the way I do. I have to control every piece, or it all falls apart." For a fleeting moment, the ruthless tycoon was just a man haunted by his own insecurities, desperate to maintain a fragile throne built on shifting sands. Ellie's heart gave a small, unexpected lurch of sympathy, not for the man himself, but for the absurdity of the world he inhabited, where power was a mask for fear. Her reverie was broken by the unmistakable clatter of heels and a familiar voice. Mrs. Penelope Wexley, the flamboyant socialite draped in layers of sparkling jewelry, approached with a knowing smile that suggested she, too, had been piecing together the puzzle. "Ah, Miss Harper," Penelope purred, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "I see you've found the true spectacle behind the glitter. It's quite the performance, isn't it?" Ellie returned a wry smile. "It's less about the show and more about what's hidden backstage." Together, they shared a conspiratorial glance, the beginnings of an alliance forming in the unlikeliest of partnerships. Mrs. Wexley's keen eye for gossip and Ellie's fresh perspective were a potent combination against the polished absurdity of the gala's social theater. But the night was far from over. As Ellie turned to leave, she nearly collided with Jasper Quinn, the head of security, whose skeptical gaze had shadowed her every move. His arms crossed, stance rigid, he looked every bit the man accustomed to control and order in a world that now seemed increasingly chaotic. "You're out of your depth," he said gruffly, though there was a flicker of curiosity beneath his stern facade. "But you might just be the wild card we need." Their uneasy alliance held promise, but was fraught with tension. Ellie knew trust was a luxury she could ill afford. Yet, emboldened by her new insight into Maximilian's fragile mask, she felt a surge of determination. If she could pierce the illusions of wealth and power, perhaps she could turn the tide, expose the true thief, and reclaim her own narrative. The night was a stage, and Ellie was no longer just a clumsy bystander. Behind the mask of comedy and chaos, a game of shadows and truths was unfolding, and she was ready to play. "Let's see how well the mighty really hold their crowns," she whispered to herself, the wry humor never far from her lips, even as her heart pounded with the thrill of the challenge ahead. The ballroom's glittering lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced like secrets waiting to be revealed. Ellie stepped forward into the fray, armed with nothing but quick wit, a paint-splattered dress, and the unshakable conviction that even the grandest masks could crumble under the weight of truth. And so, the unlikely thief prepared for the next act, one where the stakes were higher, the comedy darker, and the lines between heroism and folly more blurred than ever before. Would she succeed in unmasking Maximilian Crane, or would the night's chaos consume her first? The answer lay hidden behind the glittering facade, waiting for the right moment to shine. But Ellie was ready. After all, in a world obsessed with appearances, sometimes it took a clumsy outsider to show everyone the cracks beneath the surface. And with that, the game was truly afoot. The art of disguise, Ellie mused bitterly, was less about illusion and more about the desperate clinging to any scrap of advantage you could muster when the world seemed set on tripping you up. She crouched behind an ornate velvet curtain, the faint murmur of the gala's elite swirling through the thick air like a distant storm, and pulled a white linen napkin from the nearest table with the stealth of a nervous cat. It was hardly the stuff of grand espionage, but in that moment it was her best weapon. Her fingers fumbled, trembling slightly as she fashioned the napkin into a makeshift mask, folding and tucking it awkwardly to cover her lower face. Her paint-splattered blouse and disheveled hair threatened to give her away, but she told herself that the mask at least lent her some mystery. She had caught sight of Maximilian Crane earlier, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd with a predator's grace, and the thought sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through her. The man was a master of calculated charm, and Ellie was convinced he could spot a fake security guard from a mile away. She knew she had to do more than just hide. She had to create a new persona, however makeshift, to survive this madness. The mansion's labyrinthine corridors stretched out like a maze of opulence and whispered secrets. Ellie slipped out from behind the curtain, her steps tentative but purposeful, only to immediately catch the edge of a gilded vase. The vase wobbled precariously, teetering on the edge of disaster. Time seemed to slow as every eye in the corridor turned toward her. With a gasp, she lunged forward, trying to steady the ornate piece, but it was too late. The vase crashed to the floor in a spectacular explosion of ceramic shards, echoing like a gunshot in the hushed hallway. "Oh, for the love of Ellie," muttered under her breath, cheeks flaming crimson as she scrambled to her feet, bowing her head in an awkward apology to the gathering crowd of glittering guests. The whispered titters and gasps were like daggers, but she forced herself to smile and shuffle away, adopting a posture of exaggerated confidence she did not feel. Later, hiding behind an imposing marble pillar, Ellie rummaged through a discarded artist's kit left unattended on a side table. Lipstick, charcoal, a smudged palette of colors. Her fingers danced over the tools with the ease born of years of creative desperation. She drew a rough line of black beneath her eyes, smudged a streak of deep red across her cheeks, and even attempted to darken her eyebrows. The reflection she caught in a gilded mirror was a cartoonish parody of a security guard, but it was hers, and it felt like armor. A wry smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Not exactly the Mona Lisa," she whispered to herself, "but I'll take it." Equipped with a hastily clipped security badge stolen from a distracted guard, during a brief scuffle, Ellie slipped into the throng of guests. The badge was a flimsy shield against suspicion, but it lent her an air of authority, however questionable. Her heart hammered in her chest as she navigated the shifting currents of gossip, laughter, and subtle glances that marked the social battlefield. In one particularly tense moment, she found herself face to face with Jasper Quinn, the head of security, whose eyes narrowed beneath a furrowed brow. For a heartbeat, Ellie feared her cover was blown, but Jasper's expression softened, just a fraction, and he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Her physical awkwardness was a constant companion, turning every corner into a potential catastrophe. At one point, she stumbled over an elaborate carpet fringe, crashing into a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. The glasses tinkled dangerously close to disaster, but Ellie caught the tray with a flurry of frantic gestures, sending an embarrassed smile through the room. "Smooth as ever," she muttered, dusting off her hands. Despite the chaos, Ellie's observational skills grew sharper. She noticed the subtle exchanges between Maximilian and his accomplices, the quick glances, the whispered nods, and began piecing together the puzzle of the night's events. Each disguise, each distraction, was a brushstroke on the canvas of her survival. As the evening deepened, Ellie realized she was no longer just a hapless outsider. The art of disguise was not just about hiding. It was about creating new possibilities, embracing chaos with a wink and a nudge. And in this absurd theater of wealth and power, perhaps a clumsy art student could paint herself into a hero. But the night was far from over, and the final act promised to be the most unpredictable yet. With a deep breath, Ellie adjusted her mask, squared her shoulders, and stepped back into the glittering fray, ready for whatever mischief fate had in store next. If you were going to be a thief, she whispered to herself, make sure you're the one holding the prize. The mansion's chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting fractured light across the gleaming marble floors, and somewhere in the shadows, Maximilian Crane was still watching. Ellie, paint-streaked and breathless, was ready to meet him head-on, armed with nothing but wit, nerve, and an artist's flair for the dramatic. And if she tripped over a vase or two along the way, well, that was just part of the performance. If anyone had told Ellie Harper that by the time she found herself arguing with the head of security in a barely lit room at a billionaire's party, she'd be using sarcasm as a weapon, she probably would have laughed, then promptly tripped over her own feet. But here she was, standing stiffly opposite Jasper Quinn, whose arms were crossed so tightly it looked like he was trying to hold his skepticism in place. Look, I get it, Ellie began, voice slightly higher than intended. You don't trust me. I'm about as convincing as a cat trying to bark, but I'm trying here. Jasper's expression didn't soften. Trying isn't enough. You were caught near the scene of the theft twice, and now you were back in the thick of it, making things worse. Ellie swallowed a retort. She knew her every move looked like a blunder, but she was also painfully aware that the real thief was out there, growing bolder by the minute. I'm not making things worse, she insisted, pacing a few nervous steps. I'm doing what I can. Sometimes that means tripping over a few chairs or talking to myself like a lunatic. Jasper's eyes narrowed. Talking to yourself. Stress relief, Ellie said with a weak smile. You should try it. A brief flash of amusement flickered in Jasper's eyes before it was replaced by his usual wariness. Look, Ellie, I want to believe you're on our side, but every time Maximilian Crane makes a move, it feels like we're a step behind. And you're a wildcard, Ellie echoed, half amused, half exasperated. Yeah, well, if being a wildcard means accidentally stealing back the watch and not getting caught in the process, I'll take that as a compliment. Jasper shook his head, the tension between them palpable. This isn't a game. Maximilian Crane isn't just some petty thief. He's playing for keeps. Ellie nodded solemnly, the gravity of the situation settling in her chest like a heavy stone. I know. And I'm scared, but I'm not backing down. Outside the security room, the sounds of the gala swirled, laughter, clinking glasses, whispered gossip, an absurd soundtrack to the high-stakes drama unfolding behind the scenes. The grandeur of the mansion felt like a stage set for a farce, but the danger was very real. Meanwhile, Maximilian Crane made his entrance back into the main hall with all the flair of a villain in an old movie. Tailored suit impeccable, smile sharp enough to cut glass, he sauntered through the crowd like he owned every glittering chandelier and velvet drape. His eyes scanned the room, daring anyone to challenge him. Ellie caught sight of him from a shadowed corridor, her heart pounding. Great, she muttered to herself, fingers curling into fists. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse. She took a deep breath, whispering under her breath, Okay, Ellie, time to be brave, or at least pretend convincingly. Back in the security room, Jasper leaned forward, his voice quieter but firm. We need a plan, and we need to trust each other. Can you do that? Ellie met his gaze, the flicker of uncertainty still there, but overshadowed by a spark of determination. "I'll try. But if I trip over another priceless vase, you have to promise not to laugh." For the first time since the night began, Jasper cracked a small smile. No promises. Their fragile alliance, tested and strained, was all they had against the growing shadow of Maximilian's schemes. And as the night deepened, Ellie's awkward humor became not just a mask but a shield, the unexpected armor she would need to survive and maybe, just maybe, out with the thief. The clock was ticking, and the game was far from over. The grand hall of Mir, Archibald Sterling's mansion, was alive with the usual symphony of clinking champagne glasses, polite laughter, and the soft rustle of extravagant gowns. Yet amidst this glittering chaos, a curious hush began to settle around a secluded corner near the massive marble fireplace. "Here, Mrs." Penelope Wexley held court, her flamboyant emerald silk gown catching the light like a shimmering pool of mischief. Her bracelets jingled softly as she leaned in close to Ellie and Jasper, eyes gleaming with a conspiratorial sparkle that could only mean one thing: gossip of undeniable importance. "Darling Mrs." Wexley began, her voice dropping to a silky whisper that barely rose above the ambient murmur. "You simply must hear what I overheard behind the velvet drapes near the library. It seems our dear Maximilian's little helpers are not as invisible as they believe. One of them was positively blubbering about a certain watch." Ellie's paint-splattered fingers tightened around the edge of her ill-fitting jacket, her nervous eyes darting between Mrs. Wexley's animated face and Jasper's stern expression. The head of security, who usually bore the weight of suspicion with a furrowed brow, now looked momentarily relieved, his gaze sharp and calculating as he absorbed the revelation. "Who was it?" Ellie whispered, her voice a mixture of hope and disbelief. Mrs. Wexley's smile widened, the kind that promised scandal and salvation in equal measure. "A nervous chap named Wilkins, one of Maximilian's rather inept accomplices. He's been mumbling about the watch, fretting that the plan might unravel." The trio exchanged glances. This was the break they needed. For the first time that evening, the tide seemed to turn, the absurd social theater around them sharpening into a more serious game of cat and mouse. Meanwhile, across the room, Maximilian Crane's sharp eyes flickered toward the corner where the trio conspired. His charming smile faltered imperceptibly, the polished veneer cracking under the pressure of impending exposure. He adjusted his cufflinks with a subtle but tense motion, the silken threads of his tailored suit whispering of control slipping through his fingers. Ellie felt a surge of determination buoyed by Mrs. Wexley's audacious meddling. Here was a woman who thrived on drama and intrigue, who wielded gossip like a weapon as deftly as a rapier. Together with Jasper, whose skepticism was now tempered by cautious trust, Ellie began to sketch out a plan that might just unmask the thief and restore her own tarnished reputation. "We have to move carefully," Jasper said, voice low but resolute. "If Wilkins is rattled, we might catch him making a mistake." Mrs. Wexley nodded eagerly. "Leave the socializing to me, darlings. I shall stir the pot just enough to flush out the truth without spilling the soup." As the trio parted ways, Ellie to blend once more into the crowd, Jasper to tighten the security perimeter, and Mrs. Wexley to fan the flames of whispered rumors, the gala's atmosphere shifted subtly. The laughter and chatter now carried a hint of nervous energy, a collective awareness that the evening's sparkling veneer was beginning to crack. Ellie's heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was her resolve. No longer just a clumsy outsider mistaken for security, she was becoming a player in this absurd and dangerous game. And as the chandeliers glittered overhead, casting prismatic light across the polished floors, the unlikely alliance of artist, security chief, and socialite prepared to turn the tables on a thief who believed himself untouchable. The night was far from over, and the real performance was only just beginning. Ellie's footsteps echoed softly as she slipped through the throng of guests, her nervous eyes scanning faces with newfound purpose. The usual social rituals, the forced smiles, the hollow compliments, the endless parade of superficial chatter now seemed like a stage on which a farcical drama played out, one she was determined to rewrite. She caught sight of Mrs. Wexley again, who was engaged in animated conversation with a group of elderly ladies, her hands gesturing wildly as she spun tales that seemed to ripple through the crowd like a secret current. Ellie smiled to herself. The socialite's flamboyant interference was exactly the kind of mischief this gala needed. Jasper appeared beside her, his stocky frame casting a protective shadow. "We need to find Wilkins before he can slip away," he muttered, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the edges of the ballroom. Together they moved with purpose, weaving through clusters of glittering guests and sidestepping the bumbling accomplices who seemed oblivious to the tightening net around them. Ellie's usual clumsiness was tempered by adrenaline and sharp focus, though she still managed to trip over an ornate chair leg, eliciting a sharp glance from Jasper and a stifled giggle from a nearby waiter. "Careful," Jasper warned, but there was a hint of amusement beneath his stern facade. "Mrs. Wexley reappeared, this time bearing a tray of champagne glasses, which she handed out with theatrical flair. "A toast to the unfolding drama, darlings," she declared, her voice ringing out over the murmurs. Ellie caught a glimpse of Wilkins near the grand staircase, his face pale and twitchy as he whispered hurriedly to one of Maximilian's other aides. The moment was ripe. "There he is," Ellie whispered. Jasper nodded, already moving toward their target. The chase was on, and this time, Ellie was ready to play her part not as a hapless imposter, but as a cunning player in the game. The socialite's secrets had opened a door. Now it was up to them to step through it before the night's chaos spiraled beyond control. The gala continued its dizzying spin of glitter and gossip, but beneath the surface, the stakes had been irrevocably raised. Ellie, Jasper, and Mrs. Wexley formed an unlikely triumvirate, each bringing a unique strength to the unfolding drama. The social satire of the evening deepened, revealing the absurdity of wealth's hollow rituals and the lengths people would go to protect their fragile facades. And at the heart of it all, the stolen pocket watch ticked relentlessly, a silent countdown to a climax that promised slapstick mayhem, sharp wit, and a reckoning none would soon forget. As Ellie caught her breath and squared her shoulders, she realized that in this tangled web of secrets and lies, sometimes the most flamboyant gossip could be the sharpest weapon of all. With a wry smile, she prepared to follow the trail wherever it might lead, ready for the chaos and comedy yet to come. The grand hallway seemed to stretch on endlessly as I stumbled forward, my dress catching mercilessly on the delicate crystal of an ornate chandelier. It swung precariously above me, casting fractured light onto the polished marble floor, and I was painfully aware of the muffled shouts echoing behind me. The bumbling accomplices of Maximilian Crane were hot on my heels, their uncoordinated footsteps pounding a frantic rhythm that threatened to close the distance at any moment. My heart thundered in my chest, a wild drumbeat that was almost comical in its intensity given the absurdity of the situation. Here I was, a broke art student in paint-splattered clothes playing a game far beyond my comprehension, being chased by would-be thieves through the halls of a billionaire's mansion. It was the kind of thing you might read about in a satirical novel, not live through in the sweaty reality of a night gone completely sideways. As I darted left, the edges of my dress snagged again, yanking me back with a sharp tug. I stumbled, arms flailing as I tried to regain balance, and the chandelier overhead swayed dangerously, sending a cascade of glittering prisms scattering across the floor. I dared a glance back. The pursuers were closing in, one tripping over a loose rug and nearly face-planting. Their frustration was palpable, voices rising in a chaotic chorus of curses and exclamations. Suddenly, a slick patch on the marble caught one of them by surprise. With a spectacular flail, he crashed into an ornate statue perched precariously on a pedestal. The statue wobbled, teetered, and then came crashing down with a resonant crack that seemed to freeze the entire room. Gasps erupted from a gathering of elegantly dressed guests nearby, who turned their heads in shocked unison. The distraction was brief but precious. I seized the moment, pushing myself forward, breath ragged, legs trembling but determined. My footsteps echoed through the cavernous space as I dove behind a heavy velvet curtain, the fabric cool and reassuring against my clammy skin. Heart pounding, I pressed my back against the wall, trying to slow my ragged breathing. Then, through the dim folds of the curtain, I spotted a flicker of movement. A knowing smirk broke across a familiar face. It was Mrs. Penelope Wexley, resplendent in her extravagant gown and dripping with jewels, her ever-present fan flicking languidly in the air. Well, Ellie," she purred, voice dripping with amusement. "Seems you re quite the entertainer tonight." I blinked, too breathless to respond properly. Her unexpected presence was like a lifeline thrown in a sea of chaos. "Follow me," she whispered conspiratorially, pulling the curtain aside just enough for me to slip through. "We can't let those offs catch you now, can we?" With Mrs. Wexley's help, I navigated a maze of side corridors and hidden alcoves, the sounds of the chase growing distant but never fully fading. The tension in my muscles was a taut wire, but the absurdity of the night, the flamboyant socialite as an unlikely ally, the bumbling villains tumbling over themselves, kept a nervous smile flickering at the edges of my lips. Our escape led us back to the sprawling ballroom, where the gala's heart still pulsed with oblivious grandeur. Here, the chase reached its crescendo. Chandeliers swayed dangerously above, their crystals tinkling like laughter in the air as guests gasped and scattered in a frenzy of silk and perfume. I found myself cornered, the accomplices closing in with frustrated snarls. But then something extraordinary happened, not because of skill or planning, but pure, accidental clumsiness. I tripped over the hem of a ball gown, sending myself sprawling into a waiter's tray of champagne glasses. The crash was spectacular. Glass shattered, bubbles fizzed, and pursuers slipped on the slick floor, crashing into one another in a domino effect of chaos. Laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, a release of the tension that had gripped me since the evening began. The line between folly and heroism blurred as my awkwardness became my weapon, my tripping and stammering turning the tide. As the dust settled and the last pursuer scrambled to regain footing, I straightened, paint spattered and disheveled but victorious for now. I caught Mrs. Wexley's eye across the room. Her triumphant grin was the perfect punctuation to a night of absurdity. "Well done, my dear," she called out over the din. "You turned chaos into art." And perhaps in that moment I had. But the night was far from over. Somewhere in the glittering shadows, Maximilian Crane watched, his sly smile never quite reaching his sharp eyes. This was only the opening act in a comedy of errors far bigger than I had ever imagined. As I caught my breath, I knew one thing for certain: if this was the way the world of billionaires and thieves played out, then I was more ready than ever to stumble my way through the madness. The game was on. "Ellie! Over here!" Mrs. Wexley's voice cut through the swirl of music and laughter. I dashed toward her, the crowd parting like a sea of silk and sequins. She handed me a delicate handkerchief embroidered with her initials, a small but oddly comforting gesture. "You'll need this," she winked, "and perhaps a touch less paint." I laughed, the sound feeling strange and wonderful in the midst of chaos. The absurdity of it all, the stolen watch, the bumbling thieves, the masquerade of status was a canvas more vivid than any I had ever painted. And I was unexpectedly the artist of this peculiar masterpiece. With the night still young and the thief still at large, I steeled myself for whatever slapstick misadventure awaited next. Because if clumsiness could be a weapon, then I was ready to wield it with reckless abandon. After all, in the grand theatre of wealth and folly, sometimes the unlikely thief is the only hero the story needs.